Michael, running innovation and being ahead of the curve for a city like London, that's no small job. Can you paint a picture for us? Like, what do you see transport looking like in, say, 2050? What does the future look like for London?
Well, two big zeros. Zero fatalities and zero emissions. And we talk about 2040, actually. We have a vision for healthy streets. So we want to have sustainable travel as the dominant way of getting around cities. Feet first, cycling first, and public transportation. And we have an air quality crisis. We have a crisis of congestion, and we have a crisis of population growth. So all of those things come together in a single target for us, which is by 2041, 80% of all trips we want to be cycling, walking, and public transport.
80%?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we're here at the Green Tech Conference. Obviously, there's some amazing, innovative, there's robots, there's electric cars, there's flying vehicles, as we talked about earlier. So it seems sort of counterintuitive almost that London is really going old school almost, encouraging people to get on their bikes and walk everywhere. Is that realistic, do you think?
Well, we're already actually far ahead of many cities. For personal trips, we're like 64% already.
64% is either on foot or on a bike?
Or on public transport.
Or public
those
transport.
Three.
Okay.
But no, well, we do a lot of things. I'll divide it as follows. There's things that we know about the future.
Yep.
And there's stuff that we don't know. And that we have a particular way of dealing with that uncertainty of a lot of the things we're dealing with today. So things that we do know are a range of infrastructure investments. So we're building the Elizabeth Line Crossrail, which is Europe's biggest engineering project. It's going to add 10% of public transport capacity to London. It's going to open as soon as we can, but every 110 seconds, 200-meter-long trains carrying 1,500 people east to west. That's a huge density, actually. You'd struggle to compete with that in the skies and with drones. It's huge density, which you need in a city of London's characteristics. Part of it is infrastructure, but part of it is policy. So we just launched, I think it's the world's first ultra-low emission zone. So you essentially, through pricing mechanisms, make sure that we really clean up the vehicles that we have. We want people to take shared options, transport options, active options, but if you're in a car, if you are driving, we want to make sure that's the cleanest version we can.
And you did introduce some policy recently, the emission zone within the city centre of London. Can you talk us through the impact that had both on the revenue that you've collected, but also environmentally, the positive impact that that's made?
Yeah, well, it's not actually primarily as a revenue
right,
issue.
That was not the
that's not
goal.
The issue.
Yeah.
But we kind of need the revenue. But essentially, what this does is, at the moment, it's the central zone. It's in the central commercial zone of London. There's already the congestion charging scheme. That was pioneering. It's been over 10 years now.
Yes.
And we've now added to that you need to have vehicles, relatively recent vehicles, kind of post-2016 vehicles for diesel, a bit older for petrol, and you will be charged additionally on top of the congestion charge to come in. And an amazing thing happened. We've been trailing this for a long time, that within the first month, we had 74% compliance. We never predicted that the behavioral impact would be quite so stark and as speedy as we've seen. And I don't know what that is, but something is happening. I don't know if it's about the Extinction Rebellion, the climate change process we've had, or whether it's just a younger generation that are starting to mature or influencing their parents. Something's really happening that it exceeded all of our expectations about how quickly people would comply. So, revenue, it's a bit tougher.
Yes.
But actually, in terms of the environmental outcome, it's fantastic.
Now, it's really interesting that you're trying to push people towards public transport, walking and cycling, as you said. But what about some of the new things that London is considering? Are there any sort of, more forward-looking, interesting or unusual technology that perhaps some of us here in the audience haven't heard of that you are actually looking at considering as an option for the city to help mobility?
Well, my portfolio is, of course, I'm going to say this, the most exciting one. It's all the future mobility options. And we heard it before in one of the previous panels that there's a whole series of micromobility options.
Right.
From electric scooters, other forms of things that help you do that last mile, bikes, sharing models, dockless bikes, all the way through to the more ambitious technologies like driverless cars or indeed drones. But we have a set of principles that we apply to all new mobility. Okay. And I'm going to illustrate this with a story, true story.
Okay.
First month in the job, I had a well-funded company supported by central government grants. I don't know if people know London. Oxford Street is the main shopping area. Mm-hmm. Carries 250,000 people every day on foot.
Very iconic.
And they came to us saying they'd like to trial a driverless pod in Oxford Street.
So a driverless pod, for those of us who've not seen one, can you visualize that for us?
So kind of, I mean, it would be great for people with accessibility needs, maybe 2 to 3 meters long, maybe 2 meters wide. It would come up and down the pavement, and again, just go a safe route and allow people to move up and down the street.
Kind of like a tram, like a driverless tram.
Yeah, could be.
Okay.
But we asked them, well, what problem are you solving? Because as a city operator, making people move around the city in an efficient, safe way, how is a 2 meter by 3 meter pod going along the sidewalk at 6 kilometers per hour going to do anything other than make it worse? Right?
Right, because it becomes an impediment almost to the foot traffic on Oxford Street, which, as everyone knows who's been to London, is a nightmare at the best of times.
So we love any new mobility, if it's in the sky, if it's a micromobility option, we love it if it allows people who are less able to remain socially or economically active. We love it if it takes people into the transport network in an efficient way. We love it if it is accessible, so it's applicable for everybody. Mm-hmm. We like it less if it creates unsafe space. We like it less if it takes 60 people out of those iconic London buses and smears them out into 50 pods or 25 minivans. We like it less if it's only available to an affluent hipster who can afford the product and knows how to use an app. In London, 15% of people don't use smartphones.
So 15%.
Okay. And we have a duty to make transport work for everybody. Our duty, this is enshrined in legislation, we have to assert the rights of the public on the highway. That's the public, that's everyone, whether you're young or old, rich or poor, able or less able. We have to make it equally accessible for everybody. And so if genuinely we can solve a problem through it, I welcome any of it. And that's what we do. By the way, if anyone is thinking of coming with any news, come and talk to us first, because I will tell you the realities of working in the city. I'll tell you what will work and what won't work. And so it really depends, is my answer, if you're solving a problem for us.
So I think it's interesting because we've seen around the world with Uber, for example, they really behaved in a way, they flaunted the legislation, right? They were, and still are, in a lot of countries, illegal. And so they sort of flaunted the legislation and then regulation had to catch up. So I wonder, how has that shifted how you now look at startups and transport entrepreneurs in terms of, do they have to break the law for you guys to take them seriously? You mentioned scooters. I know that Lime scooters, for example, are in some parts of the world. How do you approach new technologies and new ideas? Can they come to you and work with you, or do they need to sort of go against the grain for you to, take notice of them?
Yeah, well, the whole, in my opinion, the whole launch and defend approach for startups, I think, is dead.
Interesting.
And actually, what I would say to anybody, yes, let's have that conversation about how we can work together. We do have a philosophy of engaging, trying to find a safe space to try something, and then working out what the system needs to be. It's hard for me to talk about Uber because we're always in court, right? but the example of bikes and scooters is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
So dockless bikes, many people will have seen those images in Asia of piles and piles of unutilized or discarded bikes, and we were determined to avoid that happening in London. And what we said to everybody, look, let's talk. Let's see about how we can actually make this work. Let's, under a trial basis, see how we can find a mechanism that makes it help the city, not creating more problems for the city.
Right.
And it takes us a long time to write regulation and laws.
Yeah.
It takes us even longer to change them. So there's a kind of deal. It says, look, I'll give you a chance to learn what the city needs, how the city operates, a chance to try something in a specified way, if in return you don't come at us at scale and come at us so quickly that we get into this regulatory standoff that has been so challenging and well documented in the press. And so far that's working. So, genuinely, I'll tell you one thing I do. So in London, Transport for London, we do a whole series of things. We don't just license or not license taxis. We run the tube, we specify all the buses, we do the congestion charge, Oyster, ticketing. It's an integrated system. But we also manage all 6,300 traffic light junctions in Greater London, right?
Wow.
And we actively manage the network. And the control center, it's like you see on the movies, with the big screens.
Everywhere,
everywhere.
Yeah.
And one thing I do in my job is I bring entrepreneurs and venture capital backers into that control room. So one of my things is I'm one of the kind of gold commands for incident management.
Pull back the curtains on.
Pull back the curtains.
Right.
And you may have a pitch deck, or you may have heard a pitch deck to say, I have a solution that's going to change the world.
Right.
And I bring them into the control room and show them the effort that goes to keeping London safe. And they hear a controller speaking to a bus driver who's just pressed the emergency button because he's seen someone being run over on the streets, and he sees us changing the traffic lights and sending the traffic office to deploy the traffic in a different way. That's the kind of thing that's the real world that we're playing in. So we do that. We're open. If you want to come, we will show you the realities of the city, where we need solutions, what our challenges are, and that's the way we're trying to get that constructive debate, by telling us what we need, but we really, really want to get the best innovation that's in the market. We don't own that.
So an open invitation to any budding transport entrepreneurs here. Are there any transport or disruptive companies that you're quite excited about that you can share with us?
Well, do you know something? Actually, I've started talking about roads and traffic lights, so I'm going to keep going. But one of the things we're trying to do is, for a lot of small companies, it's really hard for us to kind of contract with them.
Okay.
As big authorities around the world, and I guess big businesses around the world, sometimes struggle about doing business with startups. And we've tried some cool new ways of essentially applying an accelerator process, but actually with a contracting route, a market route at the end of it. So we recently went out to the market along with all of the utilities in London, that's like telecoms and water and gas, just looking for solutions about how we can get the roads and roadworks more efficiently. And we've had some amazing technologies come through.
Interesting.
So for example, one of my favorites is Penetrative Radar. You spend so much time digging up the roads, it's so disruptive. So phenomenal technology I've seen recently is the ability to drive along the road and work out where the leaks are underground
before they even happen.
Before you dig it up.
Oh, that's really...
Yeah, that's phenomenal. A company called Oxford Dynamics, they're developing barriers and safety systems that tell us when they've blown over.
So sort of preventing those traffic frustrations that happen before they actually...
So that's it. But also, there's a huge amount. I'm very excited right now about computer vision. Okay. Just to be somber for one moment, one thing that we have to deal with on our network is suicide. Right,
especially on the tube.
Do you know something? A horrific thing. If you look on Google, it tells you that it's quite a good way of committing suicide, but actually it's a very bad way of committing suicide because it's
terrible.
And we're doing a huge amount of things with our staff actually about how to intervene, how to spot people.
Yeah, I bet.
But actually, we're looking at how could computer vision understand the behaviours of people, understand where we could have high risk. So that's one, we've just gone out to the market. Does technology exist to help us understand the patterns of human behavior and make sure everyone stays safe and gets home every day?
Interesting. And I noticed in the Financial Times this week that you're also going to be monetizing the data of people who actually use your system and how they work, how they move around the tube station so that you can better plan the infrastructure going forward.
Well, we may not monetize it, but
we are using that data.
So when people connect to the Wi-Fi in the tube, we've seen some amazing things that we know because of the Oyster card or contactless when people enter the system and when they exit the system. But what we're learning through Wi-Fi is how they move within it. And some of that is because, well, do you know what? Maybe they're less able. Maybe they're carrying a bag or a child, and they realize that certain stations are easier to interchange in. But part of that is how we plan the stations. Part of that is how we provide the information
for people to move
around.
System,
so that some of these could be issues for us about how we design the stations, how we design the information, and how we nudge people, frankly. You know, one of the busiest train lines in the world is the Waterloo and City line. It only has 2 stops on the tube, and you can walk it. You know, we're actually putting up boards to say, do you know you could probably get to where you're going in a healthy way on 2 feet. And so one of the reasons that's so valuable to us is that we're trying to look for smooth and efficient use. You know, this is a system that was, we tell people we've had like a level 4 autonomous electrified transport mode in London since 1863. It's called the Tube, right? But it's growing.
It's surprisingly green, isn't it?
It's extremely green. You know, it is electrified. In terms of CO2 per passenger kilometre, it's extremely efficient. And you know, there's zero emissions at source. There's no tailpipe. But yeah, of course, it's very, very green. But what we're trying to do is actually maximise that efficiency that was brought in the Victorian era, as well as building new capacity like Crossrail that I was referring to.
So going back to your earlier goal going forward to have 0 emissions and 0 deaths, you've mentioned a lot about your staff. So the bus driver who observes an accident, the tube driver who sees someone perhaps behaving in a way that they're worried for their mental health. Given the automation of the transport industry that we're seeing happening, what is the challenge for you in your role in terms of dealing with the unions who I know are worried about what they're calling the Uberization of transport in London? How do you deal with that versus trying to be green and cost efficient and autonomous as much as possible? How do you marry the two between retaining your great staff but also automating and staying green as much as you can whilst trying to hit those 2 goals?
Well, I think, for us, the unions are really important. You know, we do everything in consultation with them. You know, our mayor, Sadiq Khan, is the son of a bus driver.
Yes.
You know, has grown up seeing the value of unions to support workers. You know, we're doing a demand-responsive bus trial launching very soon. We have made sure that the terms and conditions for drivers are the same as in any other bus service. But what I would say is that there is a tendency to jump straight to driverless taxis, robot taxis. And in doing that so quickly, you miss the opportunities, the incremental benefits of augmented services, incremental application of autonomous technologies. So, for example, we're already starting to implement and deliver a less sophisticated version of the autonomy technologies in buses. So, intelligent speed adaptation, we are already putting that into buses. I think over 700 of the London buses already have a lower form of autonomy in them. The question about what happens to the humans at the moment, you know, we don't have plans to do that. You know, the bus drivers are absolutely part of managing the network.
Right.
So it's a long way off. But what I would say is there's a huge potential from greater connectivity, from incremental autonomous technologies for the next 15 years, certainly, that means it's going to be this combination of human intelligence and growing artificial intelligence that should help the network operate more effectively and in a safer way.
And just finally, before we wrap up, given, again, that goal of 0 emissions, how interested is Transport for London in moving towards a hydrogen base? Like I know that it's more expensive and it comes with other issues, but how much is that on your roadmap at the moment?
Well, no, hydrogen's still there. We actually just made, I think it's the world's biggest order for double-deck hydrogen buses. We just ordered 20 of those. We're actually putting more effort into electrification. In the short term, Certainly, just in terms of cost efficiency, in fact, environmental efficiency right now, electric wins. The technology is moving quicker, and a lot of our efforts are electrifying the bus fleet. We're doing quite significant trials with double-decker electric buses, which again is a world first. We're actively putting in rapid chargers to allow the electrification of both taxi services. So all new taxis in London have to be electric capable, zero emission capable. So we see hydrogen will have a role. We want to keep that open. We see in our business planning cycle, electric's going to have much more of an impact in the coming 5 to 10 years.
Going forward. Wonderful. Michael Hurwitz from Transport for London, thank you so much for joining us at Green Tech.
Thank you very much. Thank you.